Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the whole nation last year, if not the most sacked. He got sacked 52 times. I'm not sure where that ranks, but I venture to say it's pretty high, if not the highest. So while he was sacked that many times, he still managed a pretty good season, even while getting hit a lot, especially at the beginning of the season. And then he showed flashes and had a good season, even with all that pressure. So today I want to talk about Shedeur Sanders and kind of not necessarily recap the 2023 season, but maybe talk a little bit about it and then kind of talk about the outlook of 2024 moving forward. And then we'll have another video coming up sometime after this video with the film breakdown. So everything we're talking about today, we're actually going to go into a little bit more detail on the film side of things in another video. But with that said, this is your first time tuning in, thanks for watching. We're just a big quarterback hub. We talk all things quarterbacks, specifically the college football quarterback position. We also have a podcast. We're in season 2 of our podcast where we have current and former quarterbacks come on, talk shop, and just kind of give us some really cool, insightful look. So far, we've had Tanner Morgan this season, the former Minnesota quarterback, and we've had Curtis Warwick so far, the former Ohio, now Indiana quarterback. So if you like quarterback content or just college football in general, please consider subscribing and liking the video and all that stuff. It really does help, and I do a bad job trying to promote that. So with that said, let's talk about Shedeur Sanders. Let's talk about what we thought he did well in 2023, and I think we made a video that actually did pretty well maybe a year ago. So we broke down the film of Shedeur and talked about like what are the traits that transfer to any level. We weren't saying Shedeur was going to win the Heisman by any chance this past year, but we thought he was going to be able to have a pretty good season, and thankfully he did, right? But what was some of those traits? Well, number one, it was take care of the football, which he did. 27 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. That's a 9-1 TD to interception ratio. That's better than any of the years at Jackson State. And his ability to read defenses, to process information. That's something that he also did really well this year, which we'll show on film coming up, right? Now, there were times he held on the ball. There were times where he tried to make a play. Sometimes as a quarterback, you need to do that, and you can live with that as an offense. And then also when you're getting so much pressure, even whenever you do have time, like alert goes off where it can still be hard, right? So I think it's a combination of things, right? But he showed his ability to process information, read the defense, and taking care of the ball. Another trait that he was able to do, and even better than probably expected with this much pressure, was his accuracy. Extremely accurate. His completion percentage was 69, I think, something like that. But his adjusted completion percentage, so whenever you take into consideration the drops that happened, there were 21 drops, it was at 79%. So 6.6% of his passes ended up being dropped, which I think is normal-ish. I think it's on the higher-ish side for drops. But regardless, extremely accurate. So kind of the biggest takeaways, he was able to take care of the football. He was able to process information, and he was accurate. Something else I think he did well at, especially in the games he had time, was push the ball downfield. He was able to showcase his accuracy and his arm strength, but also his ability to take shots and push downfield when he did have time. Now, his yards per attempt this season were only 7.5, right? He had 3,200 yards passing, or right over 3,200 yards passing, 7.5 yards per attempt. We already talked about the 27 TDs in the air, 3 picks, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. But even with that kind of lower yards per attempt, I still think he showed that he has the ability to push the ball downfield. So now you have to clean up the offensive line, which we, of course, know. We're not going to beat a dead horse. But let's talk about him pushing the ball downfield, right? Against TCU, his yards per attempt were 10.9. Best game of the season by far, right? Came out firing. Against Nebraska, it was 9.1. Now, we started seeing some offensive line issues even against Nebraska. They started getting pressure. They had decent amount of sacks, I believe. But he still pushed the ball downfield. And then games against Stanford where they lost, but he still had a huge game, 8.3 yards per attempt. And then USC was 8.2 yards per attempt where they lost, but he again had a huge second half, was pushing the ball downfield. The only other game where he was above 8 was against Washington State. He had like 10 passes. They got crushed that game. It was kind of an anomaly. Every other game, he was under 8 yards per attempt, largely because of the offensive line issues. The games against UCLA and Oregon, they were under 5. It was like 4.9 or something yards per attempt, or 4.8 against UCLA and Oregon because of all the pressure. You just couldn't take shots downfield. So I think Sanders has the strength. I think it's a tool set and a skill set of Sanders to push the ball downfield. I think we saw that, but you need an offensive scheme that can give you some more time or is able to get the ball out quicker, pushing the ball downfield, right? So even with the above stats that we just talked about, even with those games where he had yards per attempt were under 5, under 8, even with those games, he still had 23 completions where the ball was thrown 20 plus yards or more downfield. And with those completions, almost half of those completions were touchdowns. He had 11 touchdowns on those throws to only one interception. It's a pretty good ratio. And so I think that this goes to show, like, those are good numbers. You would expect someone that has those numbers to have a higher yards per attempt, right? All right, enough about pushing the ball downfield. We kind of get the hang of it, right? What else happened? Well, I think he was able to really distribute the ball, and he lived in the middle of the field, right? He distributed the ball, but he was really comfortable in the middle of the field. The games where he had more time, you saw him be able to distribute the ball outside the numbers, outside the hashes. The games where you don't have a lot of time, it's hard to make those long throws, and so the middle of the field becomes your friendliest option. Of his 30, how many yards passing? Of his 3,200 yards passing, over 2,067 were between the numbers, so we're thrown in the middle of the field. Just over 1,000 or just over 1,100 were thrown outside the number. So I think you want to see that number maybe a bit closer. I think the middle of the field is always going to be higher inside the numbers because those are more realistic throws to have. But I think Sanders has the ability to make those throws outside the numbers more often. I think he showed it when he had the time. So I think that is going to be a place that they can improve on even more with the offensive line happening, right? All right, last thing I want to hit on before we wrap this video up, and again, we're going to have a film breakdown coming up after this. I just wanted to kind of give a recap and then kind of talk about the outlook for 2024. So Sanders was really good against the blitz, 11 touchdowns, 3 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt, took care of the ball. But he was outstanding whenever they didn't blitz, which isn't always the case. Sometimes it's tougher for quarterbacks to have success when they don't blitz. He had 16 touchdowns to 0 interceptions whenever teams didn't blitz. Now, sure, that can make sense. Sometimes if you get pressure on you when you're blitzing, get the ball out quick, make a bad decision. But teams are getting pressure on Shedeur even without blitzing. There's not a huge need to blitz, right? They only blitz 31% of his dropbacks, I believe. And so they were able to get pressure with 3 or 4 guys. But what Shedeur is able to do, and this is why he's able to read defenses so well, or it's a product of reading defenses so well, is when guys are dropping 7 or 8 guys downfield, the defenses, it's tougher for a quarterback to make those reads and to fit the ball in the tighter windows because you have more DBs. And so a lot of times you'll see quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks who are developing, they might do pretty well against the blitz, but then whenever they drop back 7 or 8, they may not have much success. It was the opposite for Sanders, or not even the opposite, but Sanders had more success against teams when they didn't blitz. He had success against the blitz, and he had even more success when they didn't blitz. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us, and it restates and encourages and kind of just reemphasizes the fact that he was able to read defenses so good and put the ball in a place where his receivers could catch. I think that's a really impressive number. 16 touchdowns, zero picks whenever the teams aren't blitzing. Again, sometimes from the outside looking in, you would think, oh, it's tougher against the blitz, but that's not the case. Usually it's tougher whenever they drop 7 or 8. So that number is even more impressive, right? So a lot to like about Shedeur in year 1 starting at Colorado. You want to clean up the sacks, which I think they're addressing. They're addressing the offensive line issues. They're addressing this offensive scheme concerns they may have. But overall, I think a good year you would take for Sanders. So the outlook for 2024, I think all of this stuff, like if he repeats everything he just did, and then we're able to have more games like the Stanfords, the USCs, like it doesn't have to be 10.9 yards per attempt thrown for 500 yards like you did against TCU. But I think if you have more games like the Stanfords, the USCs, where you're 8 to 9 yards per attempt range, you have a little bit more time. You're able to kind of use the whole field as opposed to like living in like one spot. And I think that outlook can help Colorado even more, right? And again, the skills, the skill positions was never really the issue with Colorado. But the outlook for 2024, I mean, you got a favorable schedule with the Big 12. And there's no reason why Colorado can't. Their win total is right now 5.5, I think. I don't think there's any reason why you can't exceed that, and why Shedeur can't continue to develop and take that next step and be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 like he was in the Pac-12. So again, we'll have a film breakdown coming out probably in a few days, depending when I put this video out. But I think the outlook is continue to do what you do and continue to do what you did in 2023. You took care of the football. You were great processing the information. You were very accurate. Again, adjusted completion percentage was 79. And I thought you did a good job pushing the ball downfield. Just the opportunities wasn't as prevalent as you would want. So if those opportunities are more available, which they're building to do, I think you have a really good year in 2024. 24. But Colorado fans or just Sanders fans, QB fans, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the 2023 season one? Then what's your outlook for 2024? Again, I'll put out a film breakdown that is kind of going to go over his reads, his accuracy, his ability to push the ball downfield. We'll put that out here in a few days, but just wanted to come out and kind of talk about these areas. So let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And again, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. It really does help the channel, and I do a horrible job of promoting it. So we're trying to change it. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Film video coming out soon. Peace.